There are days when the silence feels heavier than words, days when your heart searches for someone to understand, but no one seems to be there. You look around, and suddenly the world feels distant, people feel distant, even your own thoughts begin to weigh you down. And in those moments, you ask yourself, why do I feel so alone, especially when I need someone the most? But what if that loneliness is not a punishment? What if those hardest days carry a hidden mercy, a wisdom you cannot yet see? Because sometimes, when everything and everyone steps away, it is not to break you. It is to bring you closer to the one who never leaves. There are moments in life when loneliness feels like rejection, like you've been left behind while everyone else moves forward. It creeps in quietly, often on the days when you are already struggling, already overwhelmed, already searching for comfort. And in that silence, it becomes easy to believe that you've been forgotten, that perhaps no one truly cares. But that feeling, as real as it seems, is not the full truth. What you perceive as abandonment is often something far deeper, a realignment that your heart does not yet understand. Because not every distance is a loss, and not every separation is meant to hurt you. Sometimes it is meant to save you. You see, when people step away or when connections begin to fade, it forces you into a space you didn't choose, a space where distractions are reduced, where voices become quieter, where the dependency on others begins to weaken. And while that space feels uncomfortable, even painful, it is often where the most important transformation begins. Because as long as your heart is attached to people in a way that replaces your reliance on Allah, there will always be disappointment. People are limited, they forget, they get busy, they change, they fail to understand, and when your expectations are placed entirely upon them, your heart becomes fragile, constantly at risk of breaking. So sometimes Allah gently, or even suddenly, removes certain people or distances you from them. Not because they are bad, not because you are unworthy, but because your heart needs to be redirected. It needs to return to its true source of strength. This is realignment. It is the process of shifting your dependence from creation back to the Creator. It is the quiet, often painful, adjustment of your heart so that it learns where true stability lies. Because when everything else becomes uncertain, you begin to realize that there is only one who remains constant. And in that loneliness, something begins to change within you. You start reflecting more deeply. You begin to understand yourself in ways you never did before. You notice your own thoughts, your own patterns, your own emotional needs. The absence of people becomes the presence of awareness. And more importantly, it becomes the presence of Allah. Because when there is no one left to turn to, you turn to Him. Not as a last option, but as the only option. Your du'as become more sincere. Your conversations with Him become more honest. The connection becomes real, not routine. And this is something that rarely develops in comfort. When life is full of people, noise, and constant interaction, it is easy to forget this connection. It is easy to rely on messages, calls, attention, and validation. But when those things are removed, even temporarily, your soul begins to search for something deeper, something that does not disappear. That is why loneliness, as painful as it feels, is often a form of mercy in disguise. It clears the path for you. It removes what is unnecessary. It reveals what truly matters. It teaches you that your worth is not defined by how many people surround you, but by your connection with the one who created you. And slowly you begin to see that this space you once feared is actually shaping you, strengthening you, teaching you patience, resilience, and trust. Because realignment is not comfortable. It requires letting go of what you were used to. It requires sitting with emotions you would rather avoid. It requires facing yourself without distractions. But through that process, your heart becomes stronger, more grounded, and more aware of what truly deserves its attachment. And so, what once felt like abandonment begins to reveal its hidden purpose. Not everyone who leaves is meant to stay. Not every silence is meant to hurt you. And not every lonely moment is meant to break you. Sometimes, it is simply Allah guiding your heart back to where it truly belongs, step by step, moment by moment, through a path that only makes sense once you look back and realize you were never truly alone. There is a kind of noise that doesn't come from sound, but from everything that surrounds your life. The constant conversations, the endless scrolling, the opinions of people, the expectations placed on you, the need to respond, to be present, to be seen, to be understood. It becomes a cycle that fills your time, your mind, and eventually your heart. And without realizing it, your inner world becomes crowded. You may still pray, you may still believe, but something feels distant. Your connection feels weaker, your focus feels scattered, your peace feels unstable. Not because Allah has moved away from you, but because the noise around you has become too loud for your heart to truly listen. Because the heart was never created to hold everything. It was created to hold Allah above all else. But when it becomes filled with distractions, attachments, and constant external input, it begins to lose its clarity. It becomes restless, searching for peace in places that were never meant to provide it. You look for comfort in people, in attention, in temporary escapes, but nothing seems to fully settle what is inside. And then, suddenly things begin to change. The conversations become fewer, the messages slow down. The people you once relied on are no longer as present. The noise that once filled your life starts to fade, and what remains is a silence that feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. At first, it feels like something is missing. You try to fill that silence again. You reach for distractions, for anything that can bring back the comfort you once had. But somehow it doesn't feel the same. The things that once entertained you no longer satisfy you in the same way. Because something deeper is happening. Allah is removing the noise, not to leave you empty, but to make space. Space for reflection, space for clarity, space for your heart to breathe again. Because when everything is loud, you cannot hear what truly matters. When your life is constantly filled with voices, you cannot distinguish which voice is guiding you and which is misleading you. And so, the silence begins to speak. In those quiet moments, you start noticing things you never paid attention to before. Your thoughts become clearer. Your feelings become more visible. You begin to recognize what truly affects you, what truly hurts you, and what truly matters to you. And slowly, your awareness begins to shift. You start realizing how much of your time was consumed by things that didn't benefit your soul. How much energy was spent trying to maintain connections that were not bringing you closer to Allah. How often you were seeking validation from people instead of seeking peace from Him. This is not coincidence. This is divine intervention. Because Allah knows that sometimes the only way to bring you closer to Him is by quieting everything else around you. Not by force, but by wisdom. Not by taking away everything, but by removing just enough for you to finally notice what has been missing all along. And in that stillness, your heart begins to turn. Not because someone told you to, not because you were reminded by others, but because deep inside, you begin to feel the need for something real, something lasting, something that does not fluctuate with people's presence or absence. You begin to turn to Allah in a way that is different. Your du'as become less about words and more about sincerity. You speak to Him not because it is routine, but because it is the only place where your heart feels understood. You find yourself sitting in silence, not feeling empty, but feeling a quiet sense of connection that you cannot fully explain. Because when the noise is gone, the heart finally listens. It listens to its own needs. It listens to its own wounds. And most importantly, it becomes capable of listening to the guidance that's always there, but often overlooked. And this is where clarity begins. You start seeing things for what they truly are. You begin to understand why certain people were not right for you, why certain situations did not work out, why certain paths felt wrong, even when they seemed appealing. The confusion that once surrounded your decisions slowly begins to fade, because clarity does not come from noise. It comes from stillness, and in that stillness, your connection with Allah becomes stronger, more stable, more real, not influenced by the outside world, not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in something deeper that cannot be shaken easily. The distractions may return at times. The noise may try to come back in different forms. But once you have experienced that clarity, that peace, that connection, you begin to recognize the difference. You become more aware of what you allow into your life, more protective of your peace, more conscious of what affects your heart and what distances you from Allah, because you have learned something powerful, that not all silence is emptiness and not all noise is beneficial. Sometimes the quiet moments you once feared are actually the moments where your heart is being guided, purified, and gently brought back to the one who has been calling you all along, not through loud reminders, but through a silence that carries more meaning than any words ever could. There are days when everything feels heavy, when even the smallest tasks seem overwhelming, when your heart carries a weight you cannot explain, and when nothing seems to go the way you planned. On those days, it becomes easy to assume that something is wrong with you, or worse, you begin to question yourself. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? And slowly, your hardship starts to feel like a sign of rejection rather than a part of your journey. But the reality is far different from what your emotions are telling you. Not every hardship is a punishment. In fact, some of the most difficult moments in your life are carefully designed as preparation for something greater than you can currently see. Because Allah does not test you randomly, and He does not burden you without purpose. Every difficulty carries wisdom, even when that wisdom is hidden behind pain. You see, preparation is rarely comfortable. When you are being prepared, you are being stretched beyond your current capacity. You are being taken out of your comfort zone, placed in situations that challenge your patience, your trust, your strength, and your understanding. And while it feels like you are being broken, what is actually happening is that you are being built. Because the person you are becoming cannot remain the same as the person you once were. There are levels of strength, faith, and resilience that cannot be achieved through ease alone. They require struggle. They require moments where you feel like giving up but choose to keep going. They require nights where you feel alone but still turn to Allah. They require days where nothing makes sense but you continue to trust anyway. And through these experiences, something within you begins to change. Your patience deepens. Your reliance on Allah becomes stronger. Your understanding of life becomes clearer. You begin to realize that not everything is meant to be easy and not everything is meant to go according to your plan. Because sometimes your plan is limited, but Allah's plan is complete. There are qualities within you that can only be developed through hardship. Sincerity is one of them. When everything is going well, it is easy to say you trust Allah. It is easy to feel content, to feel grateful, to feel connected. But when things fall apart, when your plans fail, when people disappoint you, when your heart feels strained, that is when your sincerity is tested. Do you still turn to Allah when you are hurting? Do you still trust Him when you don't understand? Do you still believe in His wisdom when everything around you feels uncertain? Because true faith is not built in comfort. It is revealed in difficulty. And that is why your hardest days are not a sign that you are distant from Allah. Sometimes they are a sign that He is shaping you in a way that ease never could. You are being prepared for a level of strength you do not yet recognize. Prepared for responsibilities you are not yet aware of. Prepared for blessings that require a stronger, wiser, more grounded version of you. Because if certain things were given to you without this preparation, they might overwhelm you. They might lead you away instead of bringing you closer. They might break you instead of elevating you. So the process comes first. And that process often looks like struggle. It looks like delays that test your patience. It looks like closed doors that force you to rethink your path. It looks like moments of loneliness that push you toward deeper reflection. Each of these experiences is shaping something within you. Even when you cannot see it immediately, even when it feels like nothing is changing, even when you feel stuck, because growth is not always visible. Sometimes it is happening internally in your mindset, in your perspective, in your relationship with Allah. You begin to react differently. You begin to think differently. You begin to understand things in a way you didn't before. And this internal transformation is what prepares you for what is ahead. Because what is coming into your life will require this version of you. A stronger you, a more patient you, a more trusting you. And while you may wish for ease, while you may long for relief, while you may wonder when things will finally become lighter, there is a wisdom in the timing of everything you are going through. Because preparation cannot be rushed. If it is rushed, it becomes incomplete. And if it is incomplete, it may not sustain what is meant to come into your life. So every moment of difficulty, every test, every challenge is part of a process that is carefully measured. Nothing is too early. Nothing is too late. And even on the days when you feel like you are falling apart, there is something within you that is being put together in a way you cannot yet see. Because your hardest days are not here to destroy you. They are here to transform you, shape you, and quietly prepare you for a version of your life that requires a heart that has already been tested, strengthened, and taught how to stand firm even when everything around it feels uncertain. There is a kind of isolation that feels heavy on the heart, a distance from people, from conversations, from the warmth of being understood. It is not always chosen, and it does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it comes suddenly, leaving you in a space that feels unfamiliar, quiet, and deeply personal. In that space, you begin to feel the absence of people more intensely. The laughter you once shared, the comfort of being surrounded, the ease of having someone to talk to, all of it feels distant. And what remains is a silence that forces you to sit with yourself in a way you may have avoided before. At first, this isolation feels like a loss. You may try to escape it. You may try to fill the emptiness with distractions, with anything that can recreate the feeling of connection you once had. But even when you try, something feels different. The comfort is temporary, the satisfaction fades quickly, and the emptiness quietly returns. Because this isolation is not meant to be filled by the same things you were used to. It is meant to redirect you. Because when you are constantly surrounded by people, your heart naturally leans toward them. You seek their attention, their approval, their understanding. You share your thoughts with them. You rely on them emotionally, and without realizing it, a part of your heart begins to depend on their presence for stability. And while human connection is a blessing, it was never meant to be your foundation. Your foundation was always meant to be your connection with Allah. So sometimes, Allah creates distance between you and people, not to remove the blessing of companionship, but to remind you where your true source of peace lies. Because if your heart becomes too attached to creation, it will inevitably face disappointment. People change, people leave, people fail to understand, and when your heart is heavily dependent on them, every change feels like a break within you. But when isolation enters your life, something begins to shift. You are no longer able to rely on the same sources for comfort. The conversations are fewer, the distractions are reduced, and you find yourself facing your thoughts more directly. At first, this can feel overwhelming. Your mind becomes louder, your emotions feel stronger, and the absence of external comfort makes everything feel more intense. But within that intensity, there is an invitation to turn inward and upward. Because when there is no one else to fully understand you, you begin to speak to Allah more honestly. Not with rehearsed words, not with routine phrases, but with raw emotion. You begin to express what you truly feel, your fears, your confusion, your pain, your hopes. And in that honesty, your connection begins to deepen. Because Allah is not distant from your struggles. He is fully aware of every thought that crosses your mind, every emotion that weighs on your heart, every silent tear that no one else sees. And when you turn to Him sincerely, without distraction, without pretense, you begin to feel a different kind of closeness. A closeness that does not depend on responses or reactions. A closeness that does not fade with time or distance. A closeness that remains constant even when everything else feels uncertain. This is the connection that isolation begins to build. It teaches you that you are never truly alone, even when you feel lonely. It teaches you that there is always a place where you can turn, a presence that never leaves, a source of comfort that does not fluctuate with circumstances. And as this connection grows, something within you becomes stronger. You begin to find peace in moments that once felt empty. You begin to feel a sense of calm even when your surroundings have not changed. The need for constant validation from people starts to decrease, and your reliance on Allah becomes more natural, more instinctive. You start to understand that being alone is not the same as being abandoned, because when your heart is connected to Allah, you carry a sense of companionship that does not depend on physical presence. You feel supported in ways that are not always visible, guided in ways that are not always obvious, and comforted in ways that go beyond what people can offer. And slowly, the isolation that once felt painful begins to feel purposeful. You start to value the quiet moments. You begin to appreciate the space that allows you to reflect, to grow, to reconnect. You become more aware of your thoughts, more mindful of your actions, more conscious of your relationship with Allah. Because this isolation is shaping something within you that cannot be developed in constant noise. It is building sincerity. It is strengthening your faith. It is teaching you to rely on the one who is always present, even when no one else is. And through this process, your heart begins to transform, not by losing its need for people, but by placing that need in its proper place. Not by rejecting connection, but by understanding that true stability does not come from creation. It comes from the Creator. And the more you experience this connection, the more you realize that this period of isolation was not meant to take something away from you, but to give you something far more valuable, a bond with Allah that is not dependent on circumstances, not influenced by people, and not shaken by the changes of life, but rooted deeply within your heart, quietly growing stronger with every moment you turn to Him in your solitude. So, when you find yourself alone on your hardest days, do not rush to label it as loss, and do not let your heart believe that you have been abandoned. Because behind that loneliness is a wisdom that is working quietly in your life. What feels like distance is often protection. What feels like silence is often guidance. What feels like emptiness is often space being made for something greater. You were never meant to rely completely on people who are temporary. And so, when certain connections fade or when the noise of life is reduced, it is not to leave you empty, it is to bring you back to the one who is constant. Every moment of isolation, every tear, every silent struggle is shaping you. It is teaching you patience when you feel weak, trust when you feel uncertain, and strength when you feel like giving up. And even when you do not understand it, even when it hurts more than you can explain, there is a purpose unfolding, one that is preparing you, realigning you, and bringing you closer to a peace that is not dependent on anyone else. So instead of asking, why am I alone? Begin to ask, what is Allah teaching me in this moment? Because when you shift your perspective, you begin to see that you were never truly alone. You were being guided, you were being protected, you were being brought closer to a connection that will never leave you, a connection that remains when everything else fades, a connection that was always there, waiting for you to turn back with a sincere heart, waiting for you in the quiet moments you once feared, waiting for you in the very loneliness you thought would break you, but was actually meant to bring you back home.